Right now, there isn't one clear version of your event. There are multiples, and they all say different things. One version lives in your project plan, another lives in your venue notes, another lives in the AV production team's spreadsheet, and another lives in your inbox. And then there's one more that lives in your head. And here's where things start to break down fast. Your team is looking at whichever one happens to be in front of them at that period in time. And you're catching all of these different conflicts in real time. And that's why things can be so disorienting when you're on site, because technically people are doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're just not working on the same event. One of the most common things I see working in event operations is that people tend to create their own documentation. And they're not being careless. They're trying to do good work with what information they have. But when there is no centralized document where everything is feeding into so everybody can see the bigger picture, you run the risk of them going and creating their own documents that can work for them and their team. And by doing this, they start to create their own operational reality for the event. So in this video, I want to explain how that happens, why the ripple effects can get expensive fast, and the importance of protecting that one central document for the entire team to use. Because this is the point where most hosts find themselves becoming the operating system of their event. Here's what usually happens when you're in the planning process of an event. Your team is usually focused on what it is that they need to deliver to make things happen. The content team is managing speakers and presentations. The production team is handling all those audio visual needs. The registration team is handling all the attendee communication. Your venue contact is focused on the setup information. Everybody has their job and they're working from the project plan. But somewhere along the way, they start building their own supporting documents, their own spreadsheets, their own timelines, their own notes, their own version of what's happening on site. And that makes sense because when they're on site, they do have their responsibilities that they need to stay focused on. They need something that is functional and relevant to their team. The problem though is that those documents often don't get cross-referenced to a centralized document that everybody can see, oftentimes because there isn't one yet. So then you have this planning document, but then there's all these different operational versions of the event floating around. Now let's fast forward to event day. You discover that one of your team members is working from a document that doesn't match the one you're working from. Maybe the room setup timings changed. Maybe a speaker for a session changed. Maybe an update for AV was made, but it didn't carry over into the main document. And now you're finding all of this out in real time where your guests are walking around. And this is a moment when things can feel really frustrating because it feels like someone has gone rogue, but they haven't. They were just making decisions for the version of the event that they had access to. This isn't a going rogue problem, this is a structural problem. Without one centralized logistics spreadsheet that everybody can work from, it's only natural that teams are going to go off and create their own thing. And over time, those different systems that they've built for their teams are going to start to drift away from the main thing, and that's where we start to have issues. But the problem isn't just conflicting documents. It's what happens when one small change starts rippling across the entire event. Most teams are deeply focused on their portion of the event, so they don't always notice that when they make one change, it might have a deeper impact on the other team members. And with no centralized document, there's no way to really track that change that's going to affect the other things. A session runs 15 minutes longer than it should. This is going to affect the next session. And now that session pushes back the room flip, which now pushes back the breakouts. Meanwhile, catering has set up the refresh station based on the original timing because they thought there was going to be a break. And AV scheduled a technician based on that transition window. And the venue staff is resetting the room based off the original timing. Now, everyone is technically doing the correct thing, they're just working off of a different version of reality. And nobody catches that ripple until it catches them on site. Or maybe the issues start even earlier. A speaker confirmation gets delayed during planning. The content team doesn't know what all they need. The AV team doesn't know what equipment they're going to need. And the venue doesn't know what setup they need. But because there's no centralized operational spreadsheet that everybody can look at and see like, hey, we're missing this information, that delay is sitting quietly in somebody's inbox until they finally realize that that information is missing, and then everyone's scrambling to piece things together. This is one of the biggest advantages to having a logistics spreadsheet. You can see how things ripple before you even get to the other side. A time change in one row immediately shows you what's going to be affected in the next few rows. A room adjustment instantly surfaces the impact of your session notes, staffing, AV, and more. This document basically creates operational relationships between everything happening. Without it, that ripple can stay invisible until it has full impact on site. And if you want to see where your event planning process actually stands right now, I have a free assessment called the Event Pulse Check. It takes only a few minutes and gives you your results right away. And it'll show you what parts of your setup are creating operational stability and what's still depending a little bit too much on you. You can find the link down below. But there's one more piece of this that matters if you want the spreadsheets to work long term. Because once you now have created this centralized document, you need to protect it. Once you have this event logistics spreadsheet, you can't treat it casually. This document becomes the authoritative operational reference point. Every change inside of it creates ripple effects somewhere else. And that's why that spreadsheet has to be protected. And I don't mean this in some dramatic way. I just mean in a practical, operational way. When too many people are involved and they're making all these changes, and there's no one person who's kind of overseeing things and keeping an eye on things, things can get expensive, complicated, and unnecessarily difficult real quickly. For example, somebody added some handheld mics to all the breakout rooms just in case. It sounds harmless, but now the AV prices change, and AV is expensive. We've also got room setup changes, staffing changes. And to be honest, half of those rooms probably didn't even need a microphone because there's only 12 people in the room. Or say someone shifts the session times without realizing that this now affects catering and the room flips and the staffing coverage, AV technician schedules, transportation schedules, and speaker prep windows. These are the things that people don't see when they're only focused on their own piece of the event. They're making reasonable decisions locally without realizing how this affects the whole bigger picture. And that's why one person needs to have full oversight over the entire logistics spreadsheet. And this isn't to control everything, it's just to protect the integrity of the spreadsheet. Teams can absolutely contribute updates, but all of those changes need to be evaluated against the bigger picture before they become final. Because this logistics document isn't just tracking information, it's protecting alignment, your budget alignment, your timing alignment, your staffing alignment, your operational alignment. And once that protection is all in one place, the event becomes dramatically easier on site. Because now you're operating from one intentional event plan rather than 5 different ones. So if your events have felt disorienting, even though everyone is still technically doing what they're supposed to be doing, this might be why. You didn't just have one event, you had multiple versions of it floating around that people were working from. Different teams were making reasonable changes without realizing the impact that they had on different things. And those consequences found you on site. And that's the role that an event logistics spreadsheet fills. It creates one shared operational picture that protects the alignment of the event and your team. In the next video, I'm going to walk you through what a real event logistics spreadsheet actually contains. Every section, every column, and why all this information is needed. This is the video where you'll finally see the full picture. Go ahead and click the video on your screen right now and I'll walk you through it.